Hey, good morning. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop. We're doing a series on creating a Blue-Winged Teal Drake decoy in a preening position, which offers additional challenges. In the last session, we got the body roughed out. And in this session, we'll really begin to detail the body and get that finished up so that we can mount that head. If you're enjoying the channel and getting value out of it, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me out. It's free, and I want to keep these videos, and I will keep these videos free to the carving community because of my passion for enjoying carving and wanting to share that with others. So let's get going. Did a quick layout of the scapulars and tertials here. Using the calipers and my pattern to kind of get things positioned where I want to carve them. And I think on this particular bird, I'm not going to carve all of the feathers, but maybe the scapular group and then individual tertials. I'll probably leave this and not carve individual primary feathers. I do think I'll carve individual tail feathers on this bird since the tail is very prominent. Kind of add, and then I've sketched in the wing feather groups here. So we'll get some carving, and I'm going to start by separating the tertials and carving along this scapular line to get those defined. This group lowered, so this looks like it's layering over the tertials, which they do. And then on this side, it's going to be a little less detail, but I wanted to determine where these lay in so that I can take some material out behind here and create a shelf and some shadows there. Okay, I'm going to use my 1/4 inch cylindrical burr, and this is actual speed to begin with. And I'm going to use that to begin to cut in the tertials and create a little step between the next higher tertial and the next lower tertial. It doesn't have to be very deep. We don't want it to be too deep, or I don't, on this particular decoy. And then I'm going to use the edge of that and define the edge of the scapular feather group. I'm not going to carve all the individual scapular feathers that I've penciled in on this decoy. I'm primarily going to carve the tertials individually and identify where the scapulars begin as a feather group. And then I'm going to use paint to really make the scapulars stand out as opposed to carving. That kind of goes depending on what you're looking for, how much detail you want to put in to your decoy. You may be doing a decorative decoy, in which case you'd want to carve all those individual feathers or a lot of feather groups anyway. On this decoy, it's going to be more of a smoothie overall. So more carving than on a gunning decoy, but less carving than fully decorative for sure. So I'm using the edge of that burr to create a little bit of a step or trench there, and then lowering the tertial group a little bit to leave those scapulars raised. So I'm lowering that on both sides. You can see, now you can kind of see where the tertials lie and where the scapulars begin, and that's what I'm looking for. Now I'm just rounding the tertials. I probably won't carve every tertial as they get shorter going towards the front of the decoy, but just I'll be carving a few feather groups in. Now I'll go ahead and speed this up. I get questions, why do you use a burr? Why do you use this particular bit at this particular time, and everybody does this a little bit differently. This is just the way that I like to do it because the burr is quick. You have to be careful with burrs for sure, but they take wood off quickly. And for this type of rough shaping, I like the speed that I get from a burr as opposed to a diamond bit or a ruby bit. There are some carbide cutters that do a very similar thing to the burr that take wood off quickly, and those are also very good, and I use those periodically. So sometimes there's not a real good reason why I do things the way I do it, other than I kind of develop this approach over time. It works for me, I'm used to it. So you may want to make some modifications to the bits that I choose for your own carving, obviously. Just working that other tertial group and define the scapulars on that side, and we'll come back with a more refined carving bit to smooth everything out. But this kind of gets the sculpture going. So I'm rounding those scapulars that overlay the tertials there. And just making sure I have enough depth in those cuts to the tertials that they throw a little bit of a shadow, which is what I'm looking for. And then we can complement that look with the paint down the road. Now I've got a little pyramid-shaped ruby bit, and I'm going to go back in and work to refine all of those things that I just carved through with the burr. And this bit will remove a lot of those burr lines because it's kind of a rough grind. So this is prior to sanding. I use a ruby bit like this. It could be a diamond bit as well. I get questions about why rubies, not diamonds. This is just what I have purchased over time, and it's what I like to use. And I use these bits until they're literally worn out and not carving anymore. So I've had this, you can tell I've had this bit for a long time. It's a little bit loaded up, but it still does a nice job. So diamond is great, rubies are great, whatever your preference. And there are different levels of grit in both of those. I think I normally go for like a medium grit. Now I'm defining the speculum there. So the rear edge of the speculum as it tucks over the primary wing feather group. So I want a little bit of those primaries showing there. And I'm just generally removing the burr lines here, like we talked about earlier. I mentioned I wanted to cut that in a little bit more, so I'm doing that right now with this bit to make it more symmetrical with the opposite side. When you look from the front, you don't want those at way different levels. It's going to look awkward. Now I'm just cleaning up the tail covert area and blending that into the tail feathers. So I've probably shown enough of this. I'm just going back with this bit and cleaning things up and sharpening my lines because I can get into spaces like that with this bit that I couldn't with the cylinder. Now I'm going to use the sanding drum. This is like a 1/2-inch sanding drum, a rubber drum with sandpaper on top of it. And I'm just going to use this to rough sand everything. But it not only smooths, I can shape things with this as well. So I'm using it to round the scapulars there and finish the sculpting of the body. It's primarily, though, I'm smoothing things out, and this is kind of pre-sanding to the hand finish sanding that we'll do later to finish things up. I really like this 1/2 inch drum. I've used larger drums, but I can use the edge of this like I'm doing right now to really cut in some lines, clean things up. And it gets into places that a much larger sanding drum can't get to. The larger drums remove wood faster, and that's an advantage. But for this size of decoy, this 1/2 inch drum works great. I'm going to speed this up. And sanding puts people to sleep, including myself, so I'm going to just show a short portion of this to finish this up. But just know that I'm going around the entire decoy with this drum and cleaning things up and pre-sanding. So by the time I get to the hand sanding, I don't have too much work to do to finish up and get to the smoothness I'm looking for in the entire decoy. I've got the body rough sanded and things are shaping up. And I think at this point, before I go any further on the detailing of the body, I'd like to take a look at the head and body in combination and work on an angle for the head that I think might work. And I thought this is a good, because I don't have this figured out, so you can figure it out along with me. This is, if you recall, I left extra wood on the neck from the pattern for this purpose. I've also got a little extra wood here, and if I just put those on flat to flat, it fits. I could do that. To me, I don't like this straight up and down line. Could a bird do this? Absolutely. And preen here. But when I look at it from all angles, I don't like that angle. It looks like the head is leaning and stilted and stiff. So this is where composition comes in and artistry, and I want to rock that head back a bit to still have that bill down preening position that I was going for originally, but maybe rock it back a bit so we get more of a curvature from the back instead of straight up and down and kind of hard line. And then if I can, I would also like to tilt that head just a bit from this direction, like he's really digging into those cape feathers. And I'll have to do some smoothing and get the neck and breast flowing, but that's my secondary concern right now. I want to get the head in a position that I think looks good from all the way around. From this side, with a little kickback, we get a nice graceful flowing line through the breast, as opposed to just straight up and down again. So I'm going to work with that a little bit, and it would take too much time to show me shaving off wood, coming back, cutting wood off here. So I'll come back when I have something closer to what I think is the correct position for this head for the look that I'm going for, if that makes sense. All right, I'm back with, after doing a little grinding on the neck, I took a little off the back so the head tilts back more. I took a little off the side so I could get that angle, which I like. I like this better with a little bit of, not the straight up and down look, but a little bit of that graceful curve. And that looks pretty nice, and I think I can blend that into the neck. Just a, just a caveat here, for those of you that are decorative carvers, I realize this approach probably not the greatest approach, because I am going to have to use a little filler around the neck, and when you're decorative carving, you don't want to use filler if you can avoid it. So we'd probably spend more time on the plan and the pattern to get the head in the right position from the get-go. Since I don't make many preeners, this is kind of the way I like to do it, but again, I'm not proposing that this is the best way. It's just one way, and hopefully some of this will be helpful. All right, I'm going to keep tweaking on that, and then I think we're getting close. The only thing I have to decide if I want to drop the head down a little bit more, and I think I will do that so that the bill actually touches the feathers there. All right, back at it, and I think this is where I'm ending up. Got that little slanted head. I've got a little work to do on the neck joint there to blend that in and make it a nice soft transition. I actually dug out a little here for the tip of the bill to go into the feathers. Then I did some work on the breast, put a little separation in the halves of the breast, and that kind of contributes to this nice curve S shape. I dug out a little bit more over here to contribute to that. And I like on this side, you can see the underside of the bill, some of the return. So I'm liking the way that looks. And that's probably where I'll put the head in, and then we can work on the neck joint. There's a lot of sanding to do and some more detailed carving here and on the tail. But now that the head is set, I can work on those areas. Nice view from the rear as well. Now I'm going to use my knife. I've kind of penciled in the tail feathers. Just going to do a light score because these don't have to be very deep. Just take your time. Good sharp knife. And notice these are not straight as an arrow. There's some curve to these feathers. For you newer carvers, it's kind of a central feather. You have to watch, there's varying grain, so it's going to pull on your knife. A little different in different areas, like right there is a hard spot. I'm just going to rock the knife down to maintain control. Another hard spot, so I'm going to rock it down. Okay, we've got those scored. Now we'll use a little grinder to put a little step in each one of those, starting at the middle and going down both sides. Now I have a little 1/8 inch cylinder ruby bit with grit on the end of it as well, and I'm going to use this to just put a little bit of offset following my scored guidelines. I don't want to make these too deep, just enough to make it look a little more realistic, and then when I paint the decoy, I can add to that to really convey feathers back here. But I'm just using the side of that bit and carefully following along the scored lines and creating steps down in each of the tail feathers. So let me speed this up, and then we can look at the rest of the process. All right, I'm at 2 times speed, and this is kind of repetitive, so I won't show much more of this, but I'm just going to do the same thing on the opposite side till we get a nice step down look to the tail feathers. I think I show a view of that here. There you go with light on it. And then once the carving is done, I'm just going to use that sanding drum to go in there. It's nice and flat, and this will take out all the grind marks and any waviness that I've put in with that small carving bit, and just clean up those tail feathers very quickly. And just with a light touch so that we're not removing the steps we just carved into the tail feathers. But you can see it's pretty quick work to smooth those out and not lose the detail. Once those are done, then I'm going to go back, take my pencil and define the feather tips. And this is going to be in a category that requires a strong tail, a category of competition, I'm sorry. So I'm going to leave the thickness of the wood there. I'm just going to carve a shallow feather tip here to keep the tips nice and strong and really not carve individual tips all the way through the wood. So I'm using that little 1/8 inch ruby bit, and I'm just going to go into each one and do a shallow definition of the feather tip. Kind of get those marked out first, and then I'm going to go back and lower that area, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, and leave the rest of the wood for strength. But this will allow me to define those in the paint, and I like the look of this with a little more feather definition on the tail. I know that's hard to see, but I'll give you a little better view in the light here in a second. So that shows you what it looks like, and then I'll finish sand that. All right, things are shaping up here, and there's just a few last details I want to put into this bird. I do want to detail this beautiful speculum area. And we're going to start out the same way we did on the tail feathers. I'm not going to do all of these feathers. I've decided I want to paint those in, but this feather group, I'm going to use the knife just very carefully. I got a reference dimension on that distance from my pattern. Now I've scored that. We're going to use the grinder to make that a step down, and then smooth this area, and then I'm going to cut in similar to the tail feathers, very shallow series of speculum feathers. And then one last thing, I'm going to carve some feather bumps in the feather groups. Not every feather, but just give it a little structure and interest. Okay, let's go work on the speculum. All right, I'm back to that little 1/8 inch round ruby bit, and same process here we used on the tail feathers. I'm just going to follow that scored line and remove material because we want to lower that speculum feather group down to a slightly lower level than the one above. So I'm going along that line first, cleaning that up. I'll give you a little better view of the area here in a second. It's a little hard to see right now. So I'm just using the bit to kind of lower that speculum section down generally, and then we'll sand that down in a second to smooth things out. There you can see a little bit of a shelf there, and I'm just rounding the edge so that we don't have a hard line there. I'm going to switch to the sander like we did on the tail feathers and just use that to run along that line and smooth that entire feather grouping out again, so we don't have a bunch of waviness from the grinding marks. All right, we'll skip ahead. You can see that's nice and smooth now. You can see the feather group there. Now I'm going to pencil in these speculum feathers as they're layered in here. They tend to get smaller or closer together the lower you go. I'm going to use my knife and carefully score those like we did the tail feathers. This doesn't need to be deep again. The scoring helps create a nice clean edge as we grind through there. If I just tried to grind that, the grinder has a tendency to wander around. And with a scored line like this, it keeps a nice sharp edge on these feathers, and the grinder will kind of follow along. Okay, good knife. Thank you, Tan. Thank you, Cooney. Same process here, again, kind of hard to see, but I'm just following each of those lines with that little cylindrical ruby bit. And I'll speed this up. Since this is repetitive, we're just going through the rest of those feathers, and you don't have to take out much to create a little bit of a shadow there and separation like that. Do some light finish sanding. Now I want to work on these side feather groups. And I'm back to the 1/4 inch burr, and I've penciled in some feather groupings, and I'm using the burr to go in and kind of outline those. I don't want these to be too deep. What I'm trying to end up with is to be able to cast some subtle shadows from overhead light to add some structure and interest to the side pocket area. So I'm just quickly outlining the groups that I've defined. And then I'm going to start going back and working on those edges and lowering and blending and rounding so that we have a few feather groups bumped out that are going to cast some subtle shadows. And to me, it makes a big difference in the finished bird, especially after the paint is applied. Getting a few shadows on a side pocket like that instead of just one big smooth surface really adds to the lifelike image that we're trying to portray. I'll go ahead and speed through the rest of this. I want to speed this up because I want you to be able to see this. It's kind of sculpting as it occurs. And this is, I would say this is not easy to get a nice lifelike look to these and soft look. I think soft is the key word. If you leave hard edges, it's going to look scaly and unnatural and hard as opposed to soft. So what I'm doing now is rounding everything. After I've carved the trenches, I've got to get rid of those, but still leave kind of the bumps. And believe me, you can overdo this and it looks like the bird has the mumps or is full of marbles. That's not what we want. We want just some soft shadows cast. I guess I'm repeating myself, but this is kind of hard to convey in a video like this, but I'm going to spend some time on this, and I'm using the burr just to do the sculpting, and then I'm going to come back like we did on the scapulars and the tertials with the ruby bits and soften everything up. And I'll also use the sanding drum and then hand sand. And all of those tend to take everything down a notch and begin to really soften the look. This is fast. As you can see, this is real time. So I can get through this process fast because of experience and confidence that comes with repetition. You probably want to work slower than this. I said this is real speed. It's not. This is 2 times. So this is faster than I would be carving, but still you can get a feel for the amount of time that I'm putting into this. All right, let's jump ahead a bit. Here's what it looks like after the burr grind, and now I'm going to use the sanding drum. Just go over all of that area and make sure I don't sand out all of the work that I just put into it, but take out all the burr marks and any scratches, any harsh lines that are too deep. I'm just going to soften it all up with the sanding drum. This is again at 2 speed. Twice speed, I'm sorry. So that gives you a feel for it. Now I'm going to hand sand. Got a lot of hand sanding to do, but you can see some of the highlights. Those bumps, feather groups, give a little bit of interest and feather-like structures to those side pockets. A lot of these colors are going to be, you won't see individual feathers with the dotted side pockets and some stripes. So I think having a little bit of structure there to pick up the highlights and the lighting will be great. So I'm going to do some more hand sanding and then we'll attach the head. Get the head attached with some 5-minute epoxy. A little bit in this area where the bill is resting in the cape area. That'll give me a good attachment point there. For strength. Try not to go overboard so it squeezes out all over your carving. I've got registration marks where I want to set the head. Right there. Got some sanding spots to do yet. He's looking pretty sharp. All right, everybody, that's a wrap on session 4 of carving the Preening Blue-Winged Teal Drake. And he's looking pretty good. In the next session, session 5, should be the last session. We'll get the neck sealed up, get everything smoothed out, get the bird sealed, and then float this decoy. This is going to a specific competition in California that doesn't require self-righting, so I'm not going to put a keel on this bird. I will probably have to weight it to get it to float with the proper attitude. Having that head offset to the side is going to want to make the decoy sink low in that position. So we'll work through the flotation on this decoy in session 5. Until then, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.